Are you tired of pretending too? Have you ever wondered why, even when you're surrounded by people, it feels like no one truly sees you? Why is it that, in a circle full of laughter and smiles, you feel an inexplicable emptiness? Maybe no one's ever told you this before, but if you're tired of looking light on the outside while sinking inside, this video is for you. We're taught to survive behind masks, to simplify our souls, to pretend everything's fine, even when our spirit is screaming in silence. But what if what you've been calling a problem is actually a gift? What if your sensitivity is a sacred antenna in a world that's lost its signal? Today, we're diving into 8 deep layers of the human experience through Jungian psychology, existential philosophy, the neuroscience of intensity, and a soul searching for meaning where only surfaces remain. So before we begin, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That helps us reach other souls also trying to remember who they are. The vortex of the surface. A world afraid of truth. Have you noticed how we're surrounded by words, but starving for truth? We live in an era of hyperconnectivity, yet conversations have never been more shallow. We talk about the weather, TV shows, politics, but avoid speaking about what's tearing us apart inside. Why? Because depth makes people uncomfortable. The silence between phrases says more than 1,000 words. The pause before a reply reveals the discomfort of being touched. And here lies the paradox. The more sensitive and deep you are, the more you sense what others are trying to hide. You feel the tremble in a voice telling a lie. You catch the glance that averts when the truth threatens to rise. You notice what no one dares to name. To you, this isn't a gift. It's a burden for others. Because deep thinkers become mirrors. And mirrors that reflect the shadow are dangerous. Have you ever felt like your presence quiets a room? That your questions make people change the subject? It's not you, it's what you represent. The surface world is fast, efficient, entertaining, but behind all that is fear. Fear of facing pain, loneliness, emptiness. Fear of diving deep and not knowing how to come back. And you, the one who feels deeply, mourns the inability to be whole. To fit in, you must hide. To be accepted, you must silence yourself. But here's something you need to know. What disturbs others is your awakened soul. And the more you try to put it to sleep, the louder it will scream within you. Overthinking, overfeeling. The invisible weight of clarity. You think too much. How many times have you heard that? Meant as a criticism. As a child, maybe you were the one always asking why, the one who stared at the sky wondering what lies beyond the stars, the one who watched people and felt their pain even when no one said a word. But the world is in a rush, and rushing doesn't like depth. So someone told you, stop overthinking, you make everything too complicated. And right there, the trauma began. Carl Jung called this early repression of the self, when the soul starts hiding in order to survive. The thinker is wounded before they even realize their gift has a name. And they spend a lifetime carrying guilt that was never theirs, the guilt of being different. Awareness comes with a price. Jung said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But awakening brings suffering. You begin to see what others don't. You notice contradictions in people's words, emptiness in relationships, falsehoods in systems. And this overwhelming clarity in a world that chooses unconsciousness becomes a burden. It's like walking through a theater with a flashlight where everyone else pretends it's dark. Nietzsche called this the free spirit, the one who had the courage to break from inherited illusions. But with freedom comes loneliness. You feel isolated, misunderstood, labeled as too intense. And in a world that worships lightness over truth, your depth becomes a burden. Isn't it strange that being light is now the highest compliment? But what is this lightness, if not the disguised weight of someone who's never gone deep? You start staying silent so you won't disrupt. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You pretend not to feel so much, not to think so much, not to be so much, but inside, your soul screams. And here's a truth that must be said. You don't overthink. You overperceive. Your brain, your body, your soul, they're on high alert. Not because you're weak, but because you're deep. You're not broken. You're sensitive in a numbed-out world. And that is a rare kind of courage. The neurology of intensity. The brain of those who see too much. Have you ever felt like everything affects you more than it should? A careless comment, a veiled criticism, a tragic news story, somehow they hit you as if the world was speaking directly to your skin. This isn't drama, it's neuroscience. According to psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron, around 15 to 20% of the population is born with a trait called HSP, highly sensitive person. These brains operate with an emotional radar that's far more finely tuned. They pick up subtle nuances, absorb environments, feel what goes unspoken. Neurologically, this means more synaptic connections, more stimulus processing, more empathy, but also more vulnerability to exhaustion, anxiety, and loneliness, because the world wasn't built for those who feel everything. It was designed for those who disconnect, automate, obey. That's why environments where ethics are suffocated, like companies that demand blind obedience, can feel like prisons for intense souls. You want to act with truth, but the system demands conformity. You think of the consequences, but the environment rewards immediate results. You feel the impact, but everyone says, don't overcomplicate. Then comes the sentence, you're too much. D. That phrase, laced with dismissal, is an attempt to shut down your depth, to label as a flaw what is in fact a strength. But intensity is not the problem. The problem is a world that only knows how to handle the shallow. That's why many highly sensitive people begin to get sick, not in the body, but in the soul. They contort themselves to fit in, emotionally mutilate themselves to be accepted, and slowly, they start dying inside, but there is a way back. And it begins with recognizing that your intensity isn't weakness. It's a refined sensitivity in a brutalized world. Your brain isn't broken. It just feels everything in high definition. The invisible crisis of meaning, the emptiness hiding in busy days. Have you ever felt a kind of tiredness that no amount of rest can cure? A weariness that isn't physical or mental, but spiritual? It's like life is packed with tasks, yet completely void of purpose. You work, pay bills, answer messages, smile in the elevator, but deep down, something whispers, none of this makes sense. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, called this the existential vacuum. He said humanity's deepest suffering doesn't come from physical pain, but from the absence of a why. And that's exactly what we're living today, a silent epidemic of soulless routines, disposable relationships, empty promises, automated tasks. We live to produce, but we've forgotten how to exist. For deep thinkers, this emptiness is unbearable. They can't pretend everything's fine. They can't adapt to a system that suffocates authenticity. And so, they become symbolic orphans, out of sync with the world, orphaned from belonging, exiled within their own reality. They try to find meaning in small things, a real conversation, a book that touches the soul, a healing gesture. But everything around them screams efficiency, speed, distraction, and this creates a kind of loneliness that isn't about being alone. It's about lacking shared meaning. That pain is like a silent poison accumulating in the margins of daily life. Until one day, the body gets sick, the mind crashes, or the soul simply gives up. And this is where a nostalgia for the sacred begins to rise. a longing for something never lived, yet always deeply felt. An ancestral memory of a time when being mattered more than having, when silence was heard, truth was sought, and eyes held depth. That longing is your soul calling out. It's saying, there is more, and you know it. Don't ignore that call, because ignoring it is losing yourself. The art of pretending to be normal, surviving by being someone you're not. Have you ever felt like you're acting all the time? Like there's one version of you that smiles at the world and another that silently observes? Society trains us to fit in, and fitting in often means hiding everything vast within us. We create a social mask, subtle, polite, functional. It says the right things, keeps the tone pleasant, smiles when expected. But every gesture comes at an invisible cost, the slow erosion of authenticity. Jung said the ego adapts to survive, but it's the soul that suffers to remain whole. This inner division creates a nearly unbearable tension. On one side, the edited self, molded to please, protect, and avoid rejection. On the other, the real self, full of unsaid thoughts, swallowed truths, hidden feelings. That fracture is what I call symbolic depression. It's not just sadness, it's the absence of self. It's living a script where you never chose to be the lead. And worse, the more you adapt, the more your mask is applauded. You get promoted, praised, admired. But inside, you feel increasingly invisible to yourself. It's the cruel paradox of external acceptance. The more you please, the more you disappear. The more you belong, the less you are. And eventually, the body begins to scream. Insomnia, chronic fatigue, a nameless emptiness. It's not illness, it's an existential alarm. Because pretending to be normal, when you're extraordinarily sensitive, is a slow kind of soul suicide. But there is a way out. It begins when you dare to ask, what if I stop pretending? What if I chose truth over acceptance? What if, just for today, I chose to be whole, even if that meant being unloved? That question might just be the key to your freedom. The sensitivity that absorbs the world when feeling becomes exhausting. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a weight in the air, even before anyone said a word? Ever talked to someone and by the end felt like you had carried their emotions on your back? That's not your imagination. It's psychic contagion, a concept studied by Jung and expanded through transpersonal psychology. Your body isn't just physical, it's also an emotional antenna. And the more sensitive you are, the more you absorb. You don't just hear, you pick up. You don't just observe and you feel. You walk into spaces as if entering invisible energy fields, and your body reacts before your mind can understand why. The problem is, the world doesn't know how to give that kind of listening back. People who listen deeply are sought out by everyone, but understood by almost no one. They become emotional containers, places where others unload their pain, but rarely ask, "And how are you?" This creates a kind of exhaustion that has no name, soul fatigue. You can sleep 10 hours and still wake up tired, because what's depleted isn't the body, it's the spirit. And here comes the trap. In your desire to help, you forget to protect yourself. In trying to be a source of support, you leave yourself without a foundation. Until one day you feel completely empty, not from lack of love, but from too much giving with no return. That's why learning to say no isn't selfish, it's emotional hygiene. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love. It's understanding that your sensitivity is sacred, and not everyone is ready to access it. As Jung said, no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And sometimes making the darkness conscious means recognizing that you can't save the whole world, but you can start saving yourself. The loneliness that heals, silence as a sacred sanctuary. What if the loneliness you fear the most is actually the space where your soul can finally breathe? We live in a culture that treats silence like failure. Being alone is seen as defeat, solitude as lack. But what if it's exactly the opposite? The dark night of the soul, a mystical concept described by St. John of the Cross, revisited by Jung and lived by anyone nearing their truth, is a time when everything collapses: beliefs, identities, relationships. What once made sense no longer fits, and what's coming has yet to take shape. It's a symbolic desert. Frightening, yes, but deeply transformative, because it's there, in the apparent emptiness, that the soul reshapes itself. It's in solitude, not isolation, that you find the parts of yourself that got lost in others. You stop performing, stop pleasing, stop chasing applause that only echoes in the void, and you begin to listen to what only silence can reveal. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not what others expect, not what earns you applause, but the whole self, integrating light, shadow, and silence. On this path, you realize the pain you felt wasn't punishment, it was a birth. It was your soul trying to be born beyond the mask. And little by little you find your voice. A voice that doesn't shout to be heard, but echoes deeply within. You become the wounded healer, someone who knows pain and therefore developed listening, someone who's walked through darkness and now carries a quiet lantern for those still lost. Loneliness, when faced with courage, doesn't isolate, it refines. It doesn't empty, it purifies. And one day you realize what you feared the most was exactly what you needed the most. Authenticity as silent rebellion, being whole in a world that fragments. Being yourself in a world that demands masks isn't just a gesture, it's a spiritual act of rebellion. We live in a time where illusion is the norm. Superficiality is celebrated. Performance is valued more than essence. And in this landscape, anyone who dares to live truthfully is seen as a threat. From an early age, we're taught to cancel ourselves, to hide what we feel, soften what we think, distort who we are in exchange for acceptance. This unconscious self-canceling is a slow erasure of the spirit. Have you noticed how the most authentic people tend to make others uncomfortable, as if their very presence exposes the invisible lies around them? Truth vibrates on a different frequency, and only those in tune can handle it. But there's something sacred about living this way. When you decide to be whole, you begin attracting what Jung called resonant souls, people who vibrate at the same depth, who aren't afraid of your intensity, but recognize themselves in it. These connections are rare, but when they happen, they have the power to change everything. Authenticity has a ripple effect. It touches people you'll never even meet. Sometimes, just by living your truth, you set someone else free who's still living in chains. It's not about convincing the world, it's about staying whole in front of it, because in the end, real revolution doesn't scream. It breathes, it doesn't wave a flag, it lives quietly, day after day, with unwavering truth. And when you choose to be yourself, even if it costs you everything, you don't lose. You find yourself. Your soul feels what the world ignores. If you've listened to every word of this video up to now, it's because something inside you was already awake. Maybe without a name, maybe without form, but definitely alive. You are not fragile, you are rare. And in this noisy world, your depth is a sacred silence that unsettles those living in illusion. Yes, it's exhausting to feel so much, to think so much, to perceive what no one else sees. But that's the mark of those who came to transform, not just to repeat. You are not alone. There are thousands of souls like yours, tired of the surface, hungry for truth. And if this video touched you, saw you, named you, then it has already fulfilled its mission, like the video now. Leave a comment with one word that describes how you feel after this journey. It helps the message reach those who need it. and helps us grow as a community of awakened souls. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Every week, we'll dive even deeper into Jungian psychology, archetypes, the soul, and awakening. And in the next video, we're going to talk about something every sensitive person has faced. Why does being real scare people so much? You'll understand how your authenticity awakens dormant shadows in others, and why sometimes living with integrity is a solitary act, but a necessary one. Because truth sets us free, and free souls recognize each other by the look in their eyes. See you there.